to go, Abe. Unless you were at the pre-conference, your first session, probably. So I'm Tyler. I'm from Clark College, which is in Washington State. And I want to think about teaching reading in the digital world. So what does it mean to read online? Is that different? My background is in literacy and reading education. And we all had to teach online for a while. Some of us are still teaching online, right? Which I think really forced us to think about, what does that mean for our students as they're trying to do these things online that we were used to doing in person. So I want to start off by using PowerPoint in the worst possible way possible, which is putting a long chunk of text on the screen for you. Trust me, I'll be better at presenting after I show you these long quotes. The other problem with doing this is I never know whether to read it to people or just let people read it. All right, I'll read it. So, to have been literate yesterday in a world defined primarily by static book technologies does not ensure that one is fully literate today, where we encounter new technologies such as Google Docs, Skype, iMovie, Contribute, Basecamp, Dropbox, Facebook, Google, Foursquare, Chrome, educational video games, or thousands of mobile apps. One interesting thing I find about that quote is when that quote is from. It's from 2013. Do you think that quote would be any different today?
For some generations, I think it's still true. I don't teach anymore, but I work with a lot of students, and primarily the students I see are older students who are struggling in classes for one reason, because of this. Everything, even to apply for a job, you have to be able to navigate technology. And so I see this more and more with our older students who have the most life experience. So sometimes they have advantages, but in this area, I think that's not the case. Kids who were born in 2000 don't know what to do with a static book. So it's all, in my opinion, it's all about generation.
Thank you. Yeah, can definitely observe generational differences here.
Well, there's been quite a bit of new technology that your list does not include artificial intelligence. And I hate to say it, but some of the things on there like Facebook are old people platforms, so they're, we got Instagram, we've got tons of stuff. I'm old, so I don't know them all, but and there's new things every day. I mean, it's just, technology is just expanding at such a rate that this doesn't even cover what we're doing with a dozen years later.
Completely, right? And I think this is from an article, and the article went on to talk about how literacy will be different tomorrow, right? And like Donald Liu and the authors of this article are sharp people. So I think they knew what they were doing when they gave us this list. They knew that when people, what is it, 12 years into the future, looked back at this, we would look at their list and be like, oh yeah, they're right. Literacy has changed in the, in the future, right? The literacy of tomorrow is different than the literacy was in 2013. I don't know what Contribute and Basecamp are. I don't know if people ever use those. They were probably a thing in 2013, right? I was doing other things then, right? Zoom isn't on here. That would definitely be on there, right? If we were talking about this today. So I think to the point of Donald Liu and the other authors of this article, yeah, I mean, some of these things are changing, and these expectations, right? They had no way to know what we were going to go through beginning in 2020 with education, right? But the demands of how to be a literate person, how to be able to engage in education changed with that. Oops. All right, one more. PSTRE, or problem solving in technology-rich environments, was defined in response to the understanding that adults today face many non-routine tasks that cannot be completed by habitualized actions. So the first quote is in reference to something called new literacies. This is kind of my theoretical background for what I'm thinking about. And the idea that, yeah, the literacies of books were one thing, and now we're dealing with literacies in new ways. There's new things that we have to be able to do. And here, if we're thinking about something like digital literacies, oftentimes when it's taught, I think it's often taught as a set of sort of skills, like I'll do this, now you do this, right? Especially for people who are not confident at all on computers. I've taught those classes, right? But I think there's a lot of things online that are non-routine that I can't just be like, let me show you this and now you do it, right? Because if someone goes from Skype to Zoom, they're not going to have all the exact same clicks to do. You've got to be comfortable with, oh, let's see, let me find my menu. Let me search for the thing I need to find, right? So I think this is another challenge that many of us or our students have dealing with the online world. All right. I'm not gonna read these to you, so just take a second. Take a second. And these are a couple social media posts. So for folks online, if you have any thoughts on these two social media posts, just drop them in the chat. And after everyone here finishes looking them over, we'll get some thoughts from people here too. Okay. And does anybody have any thoughts or reactions to the social media posts? Yeah.
So this reminds me of an article I read recently from a boy in Tennessee who graduated not even knowing how to spell his name because he used ChatGPT for all of his homework assignments. And so we need to be teaching students not only how to use these AIs to help, but we also just need to make sure that we're still teaching students the basics of literacies, teaching them how to read, how to write, but also involving computers as well.
I'm hearing you kind of qualify what you're saying there. You're saying we need to do this and this. We need to do this, but we also have to think about this, right? Okay. Was there one of these in particular that inspired that thought? One of these posts in particular? Yeah, who's saying that like assessment for her doesn't seem to be representing real life where she can do certain things. Okay. Other thoughts? Anything in the chat? Okay, so I'm seeing chat on Zoom through the Q&A that I guess doesn't show up in Whova, but Rob said next we'll be letting them use calculators, exclamation mark. The horror. I'll be doing a presentation on math and science tomorrow morning. So if anybody wants to talk about math tomorrow, come to my presentation, 8 a.m. again. So if you're up early tomorrow morning. Sorry, I think I saw some hands up in the room here as well. Yeah.
I'm kind of looking at the big one on the left and and I'm like, there's a whole ethics moral thing going on there too. I mean, you're representing something that's not your own. And you hate to quote Marvel, but great power is great responsibility. I mean, just because you have it at your fingertips doesn't mean that you have the right to use it however you choose.
So I'm hearing you thinking about, like, we have to think about how we use tools like chatbots, right? Okay. Yeah. Other thoughts, other reactions. Let me explain a little bit. The one on the right there is what a lot of it is really small, so you may not be able to see it that well. So it was a research article done where they were looking at something really specific. They were taking quotes from, I think it was news articles, and then asking AI chatbots what the source was for that quote. And when they did that, I think they said 60%, more than 60% of the questions the AI chatbots failed to answer, failed to give them the quote, right? Does anyone have thoughts on this one on the left here? And I think I got another chat here. This one on the left. Oh, and actually, real quick, Adrian mentioned in the chat that understanding technology comes with a responsibility to teach digital ethics, right? And I completely agree. I think when we engage students in any technology, right, we need to think about the ethics of using that, and that can be, that can be using chatbots. It can be, how doing online searches. And I mean, it can be using things like Google, which, I mean, I'm using Google Slides right now because it's really convenient, but I'm still wrestling with how do I present to my students the question of like privacy. And if I'm going to ask them to use Google, I'm going to ask you all to use a shared Google Doc later, right? And yeah, I think there are legitimate privacy concerns around using Google products. And I think I saw a hand in here.
I actually agree with the girl. When I'm on my job and I don't know how to do something, I don't drag out my big manual and dig in it for 30 minutes to find my answer. I Google it. And it seems like we're wasting time teaching them how to look for answers in the traditional way when on the job, how many people are going to go pull a manual to read about something? You watch a YouTube clip for 30 minutes. So I do agree. And I'm from Tennessee. Our education system needs work. But I think we're doing them a disservice if we don't teach our adult students how to use those tools when they need them.
That's really reminding me of the like new literacies quote that I started with at the beginning, right? That like there are these literacy practices that where we find information in different ways than we used to, right? I remember using a card catalog at the library. I don't think a physical card catalog exists at a library anymore, right? Any other thoughts before we move on? No? Okay. Also, I think I forgot to warn you. I'm going to ask you all to do, oh, go ahead.
Kathy says, in my experience, my students often know more about those resources than I might.
Yes. And I think that teaching digital tools and teaching students to do stuff online can be intimidating because, right, it can prick at our own insecurities about, but there are so many things I don't know. Like, what if students ask me questions that I can't answer for them, right? And I think it really pushes us into that place of being able to trade off the role of teacher and student, where we all become sort of co-teachers, co-learners in a classroom. Or it forces us to be willing to have those moments, right? Because there's no way that you can know all the things online, right? There's no way to know all that. There's no way to be completely prepared. And yeah, students, even students who struggle in all sorts of different things, will have things that they do really well online or on their phone that they're familiar with, right? And they'll be able to they'll just be able to problem solve their way through something sometimes. I have that happen all the time where I'd be like, whoa, what's going on here? And someone will be like, well, try that. And it works, right? Like, great. Like somebody had the answer for me. So totally. I mean, I think that like we have to be ready to learn from each other and learn together and be collaborative, which I think again challenges that kind of approach of let me show you how to do something, now you do it. And sure, now and then like I'll do that, right? If there's something that I'm like, I want you all to be able to do, comment in a Google Doc. Let me show you how to do this, and then we can go on. Let's see. Okay.
So Kathy follows that up with, we have to teach them how to use these critically, and we also have to be flexible in our teaching so we can approach them from something they understand and relate to.
Completely. I think we have to be able to connect these things, right? We have to connect things to people's knowledge, their own practices, the things they care about. And yeah, Adriana also followed up on our conversation about libraries with we've come a long way since the Dewey Decimal System. I've not looked for a book by the Dewey Decimal System numbers in a while. Okay. Also, I forgot to warn you all, to everyone here and in person and online, I'm going to ask you to do stuff. And I'm a really patient guy, so I'm going to wait for you to do stuff. So I'm going to ask you to do stuff online, and I think that's basically where we're headed from here. So thank you everyone here and online for your thoughts on these two posts. I found them to be interesting because they're not necessarily talking to each other. They're not even necessarily disagreeing with each other, but I think that's the reality of all this, like dealing with new technologies like chatbots, is that we all have all sorts of opinions and sometimes conflicting opinions within ourselves about these kinds of new things and how we want to use them. And I think we can let those multiple things be true as we make sense out of like how we do this ethically, how we do this collaboratively, right? How we respect the needs of our students. All right, so what I'm going to ask you to do then is go to, you can use this QR code here. It's going to open up a Google Doc for you. And Elizabeth, if you want to post that link in the chat so that the link will also be in the chat. And what I'd like you to do is, if your last name, I'm going to give you an assignment. And your assignment is, if your last name starts with between A and K, then I want you to find the most pro AI piece of information you can find online. And if your last name starts with L to Z, I want you to find the most anti-AI piece of information you can find online. Do you think it's possible to find people talking about AI online? I got a really strong maybe. I'll agree with that. Oops, I think I got somebody else in the chat here. Oh yeah, and then Adrienne added in here from, I think, going back to our first conversation, technology expands and updates too fast a pace for everyone or anyone to fully understand. So we have to be willing to help each other and learn from each other. Completely agree. So you're going to get this. Are people getting the Google Doc when you open it up? So what I'd like you to do then, find one piece of information online. So you need, how are you going to find that? How are you going to find something online? I'm hearing a bunch of people say Google in person here. That seems like a pretty good strategy to me. So you're going to look for something online, right? Depending on the assignment I gave you, that's either pro AI or anti AI. And I'd just like you to go into like one row in that Google Doc, type in real briefly like a sentence, or you don't even have to use a full sentence. I'm not grading anything in here. Sort of what was this about, and then post the link to it in the second column. So you'll see there's like sort of 3 columns there. So I'm going to give you all a few minutes to search around, and I'm going to wander around and chat with people here in person, and we'll keep an eye on the chat and see if there are any questions. So I'm going to give you all a little bit to do this. Actually, before I stop talking, does anybody have any questions about this? Is this kind of clear what we're doing? Any concerns? No? Okay. If you got questions, let me know. If you got questions online, drop them in the chat. Let's take 10-ish minutes and then we'll check back in. So just to catch up, folks who just got here first, welcome. Thanks for coming. We've been talking about the different kinds of things that our students have to do online, how sort of the traditional literacy of reading and books has kind of expanded with the internet. Now students have to do so much more to be able to learn, to be able to be students. And we just got to this activity that folks are working on right now. So I asked everyone to go online and try and find something that's either really pro AI, artificial intelligence, or something that's really anti AI based on what your last name is. And then we're all posting it in a Google Doc, which you can use that QR code there that's on the screen. That'll open up the Google Doc for you. Also, it's the link to it is posted in the chat on Hoova. So if you have any questions, let me know. We're going to spend, we've got probably another 5 minutes or so that I was going to give folks to search around and find some stuff. Also, I see a lot of people posting stuff in the shared doc already. Thank you. Looks like people are finding some interesting things. So I'm going to start taking a peek at that. So we got a couple comments here in the room that I just want to mention because I feel like these are great examples of some of these challenges we ran into. So one was it was challenging to do it on your phone, right? And yeah, like I have students who take, like, we still offer some fully online classes. We didn't really offer any before the pandemic at Clark College, but we're still offering those because so many students sign up for them. And I have students who try and take these fully online classes and just do it on their phone. And like we use Canvas as our learning management system. And boy, I have a lot of respect for their stick-to-itiveness, their willingness to like try and do this like with all the other things going on in their life. But boy, is that challenging to do something like that just on your phone. And I think that's a really important thing to think about as we like engage students in digital literacies. Like if they almost always use their phone for things, there's probably a lot of things on a laptop, on a desktop that are going to be different. They're going to run into challenges they're not used to, right? Going that direction, right? Or there'll be things, right? If we ask them to do it on their phone, that may be more challenging. If I haven't anticipated what's this going to look like in a mobile setting, right?
Either a tablet or a laptop. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I always try to tell my students to do it either find a laptop or a tablet. It's going to be so much easier to work with the programs that we have in our adult ed program. And that if they can't, then see if they could borrow, or we have a loaner program at our facility, so we can loan out Google Chromebooks for them at an 8-week, borrowing kind of system kind of thing. But yeah, so much easier because doing it on the phone this is way harder. So
Yeah, something that can be habitual or easy in one setting can suddenly become way more difficult on a different device. Or you change one little thing and suddenly the things that we know, right? And that's where all the the habitualized actions I know online suddenly go out the door, and I have to like become a problem solver and say like, oh, okay, well, like what's my strategy for dealing with this? Did you were having issues with it crashing? Was that what you were saying?
When I try to post the link itself into this document, it keeps crashing. So I'm just going to find a way to work around it.
I mean, that is the reality of doing stuff on digital devices, finding workarounds, right? You could always try hyperlinking it. I don't know if that would crash if you do the hyperlink. So, but yeah, no, totally. Right. I thought those like things along the way are just such perfect examples of like the challenges that are the reality of dealing with these kinds of things. Like these are the constant stream of challenges and working with whether it's the students in my classroom or it's my colleagues or it's me trying to do things or it's right all of us in here doing things. Welcome. Let's see, I got another comment on here. Okay. Yeah, Adrian mentioned that she was also having some issues posting stuff in the document, but had found some information on Wikipedia, and also says, I totally agree with using a computer instead of a phone because of the challenges on the phone. My computer Wi-Fi is acting up right now, which is the only reason why I'm on the phone. Not fun. And like another great example of the kinds of challenges, right, of doing these things, like whoops, Wi-Fi issues, whoops, some other, right? These kinds of things it's just like often a steady stream of these things that we all have to be like ready to like weather the storm. Let's see, where are we at on here? How many posts do we have? Got quite a few. Do people need what, maybe 5 more minutes? I'm seeing a lot of people seem to be still working on stuff. Would that be helpful, another 5 minutes, or are people ready to go? What about online? Do people have thoughts online? Another 5 minutes, or are folks online ready to? Actually, I'd like to see some more examples, honestly. So I'm gonna make an executive decision. Let's take 5 more minutes. Take another 5 minutes. Look around. If you already posted one thing, feel free to look through the list. I'm going to ask you all to look at the list here in a minute anyway. Maybe find another thing to add. So I'll give you another 5. We're here.
Okay. I just had a question. Did you just want us to post the links to the Google site, or do you want us to post what we found in regards to AI?
So here, let's see if I can change what I'm sharing. Stop the share. And here we go. Okay. So this is the Google. Whoops. I just shared it, but I didn't. See if I can do this. Okay, so this is the Google Doc here, right? So we've got 3 columns. So I would say post the link so that people can follow up and people can see what you found. And then in the very first column there, just very briefly, what's the saying? You know, like I said, one sentence or less, maybe. You don't have to write that much. And then I do have the last column for the source, because we're going to talk about sources in a little bit here. But the source may be obvious just from the link. Let's take 2 more minutes, finish posting what you got, and then we'll chat. So actually, if you have already posted something, I would say take a look at 2 to 3 other posts that other people have put on there. If you're still posting something, finish that up. If you're done posting, take a look at 2 to 3 other things that other people have posted, and then when we come back here in a couple minutes, we'll chat about what we found. All right. Have people had a chance to look at some other posts? Yeah, seeing some heads nodding, other people reading, or watching TikTok or something. So I mean, you could find TikTok posts related to this. So maybe that wasn't a passive aggressive comment by me. I don't know. I'm a Midwesterner, so it's really hard to tell. um,
Sorry. Did you set the animals to keep us anonymous? How does that work? I've never seen that feature up there.
Yeah, so at the top of the Google Doc, it just lists everyone as like anonymous something with like a little animal, right? So that's if so there's a couple different ways to share a Google Doc, right? Like I can share it by adding everyone to it. And in that case, then you'd have to be signed into your account and you would show up as yourself. Or I can share it by going to the sharing settings and say anyone with the link can edit this. So then you don't have to be signed in. So then you just show up as anonymous. Yeah. So yeah, kind of if you want to be able to see like the edits that individual people made, then you want to have share it directly with their email. So then when you go back and look at like edit history, you can see, oh, Elizabeth did this, or Tyler did this, or whatever, right? Okay. All right. So I think did I get a comment here? Oh, nice. Adrian found something. I'll add that. All right. Yeah, we got all sorts of stuff. This is great. So let me yeah, I mean the question of like what to trust online, like what sources do we trust online? That's a really important question, and it's an important question. I think back to like I think someone had mentioned that whenever we teach with computers or get our students online, we have to teach ethics along with that. And I think at the same time, we have to be able to teach and talk about how do we critically evaluate what we're looking at, right? How do we decide what we trust and how much we trust it? Because it's also not just like a binary of good, bad, yes, no. It's often sort of like well, how much do I trust this, right? Like, do I trust it in next to this thing or versus that? Okay, so what did people let's just hear back. What kinds of stuff did people find? What did you notice other people found? And actually let me go. I had questions in the slide. Let's follow my plan here. So what sorts of information did we find? Did you see something you agree with? Did you see something you disagree with?
Looking at it, there was one article talking back how humans we have a bunch of biases and all that, and how we can cater AI to that. And then it kind of relates to like a couple of slides ago where it said over 60% of AI generated questions were false. So it's just kind of worrying that not only can somebody base this AI off what they're thinking, and then they can present it as facts to other people as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, in that study, they were looking at seeing if AI could recognize where these quotes came from articles online, right? And 60% of the time, the AI couldn't identify what was the source of this quote. So they were running into some of these limitations of it. And then, yeah, that question of bias, I think, is really important because, like, what is ChatGPT? What are all of these trained on? Like, how does it generate these answers? Do people know?
It just researches at such a fast rate. We have to remember these are not thinking machines. They don't deliberate. They're not self-conscious. So they can only go from input, which goes to your point.
Exactly. They were trained on large language models, right? Just huge amounts of text from the internet. And the example I always give to my students if I start talking about generative AI or like chatbots is I show them when I'm typing an email in Microsoft, because my school has Microsoft emails for staff and faculty and Google for students. Still kind of confused by that. But anyway, so I have a Microsoft email and it does the like suggestions when I'm typing an email. And I'm like, well, if I start typing, hey, how's it suggests it's going. I'm like, how does it know that? And they're like, well, it's because that's like a really common thing to say. I'm like, exactly. That's how generative AI works too, right? It's just predicting if you start with this word, what's the most likely thing to come next based on reams and reams, although that's, I guess, an outdated word now if we're thinking digitally, of text that it's read, right? Well, what's the text it's read? It's text that humans created. So what's it gonna, is AI gonna like remove our biases? No, it's gonna reflect our biases back to us, right? So any biases that we have as humans, we should expect to see it get spit right back at us by generative AI. So we have to bring the same kind of critical lens we would bring to anything we view online to the stuff we see from AI. Yeah.
So Kathy says the fact that we have to teach critical thinking doesn't change. What students must evaluate in light of critical thinking does change. And then Misty also says that this activity that we just did would be great to do with adult students because you could discuss sources and determining biases.
Misty is like predicting the future for what we're going to do next. I'm impressed. Other thoughts here? And yes, completely agree with both those comments. Other thoughts? You see stuff you agree with, you see stuff you disagree with, just have other comments.
One that I agreed with, which was the AI partnerships. I'm still on the fence with AI, but I think I'm kind of fascinated with everybody else's fascination with it because it's like, oh my God, look how fast it goes. And I did 10 slides in, 3 minutes or less. So I do like the idea of the partnerships possibly so that we can take the time to look at taking that critical look into, okay, who put this information out? Because that's what we did with the internet, initially. And that's what we were taught. So the parts, I guess, that I disagree with is, I guess, some of the, I won't say how I want to put this, some of the charged language around it. I like the idea of seeing what's new, but I also like to do it, with a level of caution.
Yeah, no, I love your way of framing it. You're fascinated with everyone else's fascination because, yeah, that resonates with me really strongly. I am also fascinated with everyone else's fascination, but I'm also the one presenting right now. So maybe, yeah. Let's see. What's my next? I want to be cognizant of time. Let's hold off on that. Do I have any other responses to this here? Yeah, let's do maybe one or two more.
I thought it was interesting because when you looked at like the pros, it talked about how it helps workplaces kind of become more innovative. But on the flip side, it talked about how, like, for example, if you go to the doctor, you don't want your doctor to be reliant on AI. So really thinking about like, okay, so what position or what type of jobs are able to use this versus what not? Because as educators, we're expected to know everything. But you talked earlier about what if we don't know an answer to a question? Or do the students expect us just to know everything? Or, I mean, if as a doctor, they're expected to know everything, but of course they're human, they're not. So just kind of going off of, okay, when are we expecting people to use it versus not, and using that critical thinking lens of, okay, what happens if they don't? Or what if it's wrong?
Yeah, I think your comment made me think of I guess you were talking about like how much do we trust it? When do we use it? When do we not? Right. And like And I think those are such important questions for our students too, because I've noticed when I ask my students to just like say search for something online, oftentimes a lot of students will search, and whatever the top result is, they're just like, I've got my answer, right? So like when I'm doing this, I know my role is to push them to look further. Like let's dig deeper into your search results. And now, if you've noticed on Google, your top search result is an AI generated result, right? So now if a student's like habit when they search something is I just take my top result and that's my answer, well, whether they know it or not, their top answer is an AI generated result, right? Which doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means though we need to be thinking critically about like how much do we rely on this? You know, do I rely on that alone? All right. Any other thoughts here on our results so far? All right, let's move on because I want to make sure we've got time. So maybe we'll just say, look at one source. So what I'd like you to do here next, and I need to, let's see, I need to switch what I'm sharing to the document. And then we need to do this. All right, so I want to demo real quick. Oh boy. So moving this mouse so backward to the way I'm facing. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna demo for you real quickly to comment in a Google Doc. Right? I can just select something like this. And then I move over here to the right and it has this little add comment function, right? So what I'd like you to do is go back into the Google Doc. And you're like, oh, and take a look at where did this information come from that we found, right? Where did the information come from that we found? And for example, like this is time.com. Has anyone heard of that source before? Yeah, right. It's kind of a well-known magazine, right? So I could say something like, well-known magazine. I don't know. Say whatever I want, but I just make some kind of notice what you've got in there. Did I spell that right? Also, I can't see. I'm looking at the. Okay. Don't want to embarrass myself. So take a look. What's the source that people found? So go back in the document. Just look at one. Find one source. Leave a comment. Is this a source that you trust? A source you don't trust? One that you've got some like uncertainty about? Do you think like, oh, like I mean, with time, I guess I could say, I mean, it's a well-known magazine, but it also probably depends on who's writing it. Could be could be an opinion piece. It could be, I don't know what. I'm not actually, I don't read Time, I guess. So like, I don't, maybe I'm not. Well, people online can't hear without the.
The whole purpose of the link was to click on the link and find the article that you found to verify what you found was true or something you agree or disagree with. That was mine.
Yeah, no. Yes, I agree. And so I'm just asking real quick, pick a source, make a comment. I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes because I don't want to run out of time. So I'm gonna give you like 3 minutes to do that, and then we're gonna come back together.
So Kathy has commented the issue is dependence on AI versus using AI critically. I'm going to add something to that myself. I was in the pre-conference session yesterday and they said to treat AI like you're the boss and it's your employee. And I was like, well, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, that's a useful metaphor. I want to think more about that one. I like it. Oh, is this a All right. Have people had a chance to leave some comments? I noticed there were some comments on there already. I want to move on just in the interest of time. I think we're going till 9:10. Am I right on that? Okay, got some verification here. Thank you. So, let's see. Let's actually just skip those and go right here. Thoughts here? Or do we want to, you know what? We've kind of talked about this some already, and I'm more interested in this. So I asked you to look at sources and whether you commented or left a comment or didn't leave a comment, you were already thinking about this, right? Unless you were on TikTok, which is fine. So what did you have to think about when you were thinking about these sources? What did people have in mind when you started looking at the sources that information came from? How did you, yeah.
I went immediately to IBM and MIT because those are the ones I'm most familiar with. So even this is biased. I'm looking at the ones I recognize and I already trust. And I have to confess that because of that, I may have overlooked some really good ones that I should have noticed.
Okay, so you went to ones you trust, but then you're recognizing that limits what you're open to seeing. Okay, other thoughts?
I just went to the way we view credible sources. So I look for the .edus and versus the Reddits. So I guess the same way we look for other credible sources.
Tell me more.
Okay.
Tell me more about the way we look for credible sources.
Well, the way that I guess the way that I was taught and the way that I teach it. Credible sources tend to end in .org, .edu, the .govs versus the .coms and the what else? Anything that's school related, government related. Although now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking about how biased that could also be. But again, it's what we're taught, what is considered to be the credible sources.
Okay, so one you were thinking about looking at sort of the end of a website, right, as one way to analyze it. But then I'm also hearing you, and you're saying it. Then you're bringing your own sort of critical lens to these and saying, okay, but even then, like, you know, if this, how much do I trust this or not trust this, right? There can be some variance in there. Okay, good. Other thought, and here I've got a comment here from Adrian. So I don't think those of us online can do this, but I'll say that this may strike up a new set of biases on your familiarity with a source. I'm familiar with Time and Britannica, so I'd be more prone to use them at face value, but the others that I haven't heard of, I may dismiss but could be more reputable and precise, right? So if we dismiss ones that we don't know, again, kind of like the comment here, we may be missing something that could be really helpful.
All right. Kathy says, I look for university research or those with good reputations. I avoid social media or sources that are obviously radically left or right.
Social media. Also, I think it's worth thinking about how social media can vary. So if I go back to the two examples I gave, right? One of these is a social media post linking to research, right? Another one is from a user, but I think that user does work in some AI industry, right? But you'd have to dig, right, to find something like that. Any other thoughts here? Did anyone look at something that a source they didn't know? Anybody look at a source they didn't know? Mm-hmm. Michael, okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and say that just so that people online.
I really was talking to myself. I've learned something in that moment because I went to the ones that I know well and didn't give the others a chance.
Yeah, and Michael saying I rely on familiarity. Do I know the name of the company? Do they have a good reputation for reliable information? With new sources, I'm more anxious about relying on them. So I'm hearing this again, this sort of concern about like new sources that we don't know. So what do we do? Like there were some suggestions here of like, is it a .edu? Is it a .gov? So there's some of those sorts of approaches. Let me see. I've got a slide that that talks about that a little bit. Where's this is something particularly from the library at my college, but it's probably kind of similar to things other people have seen. Have other people seen similar sorts of ways of analyzing sources? We're thinking about like, look at the, who's the author? Do we know it? That's kind of what we've been thinking about here, right? Like, do I recognize where this has come from? What are the sources? So this is one approach, right? One approach to say like, here's sort of a checklist that to analyze. If I'm doing this, if we used this approach for one of the websites that we don't know, what would we be doing? We'd be on the website and we'd be searching for information on that website, right? So I want to contrast this approach, which we might call vertical reading, meaning I'm scrolling up and down on the website. Think vertically, right? With what we could call lateral reading. So if vertical reading is scrolling up and down on a website, lateral reading means I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to go laterally. And I'm going to say, what's this organization? I'm going to search, right? If I haven't heard of I saw some sources on there that people hadn't heard of. Let's see if I can find where if I haven't heard of Bernard Marr and Company, well then I'm gonna do a search and I'm gonna say, give me a second, I gotta get this thing out of the way. And I'm gonna say, who is this, right? And what information is there about this source? So this is what we would call lateral reading as a way to evaluate a source. And it involves going on the internet and seeing what information we can find. And I would encourage you, this is the slides are uploaded on Whova. Or you can also just Google Digital Inquiry Group. So the Digital Inquiry Group is from Stanford University. It came out of a group that was originally something to do with history. It was focused on history education. And now they've switched into digital inquiry. And a lot of their focus is on teaching students lateral reading. So as a way to evaluate sources, if you run into a source you don't know, search online about it. Open a new tab, see what you can find. Often you can use Wikipedia and find real quickly. They have some really great free curriculum resources on there to help you introduce your students to this. So, for example, some things I've done. I was teaching a class that was a ESL computer class. So I had to think of ways to simplify the language to make it accessible while I still asked them to evaluate information online. So I eventually settled on using some memes. So I showed them these two memes. And I asked, like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, what are the memes saying? What are they claiming here? And do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think? Any thoughts here on the? Ooh, I got a comment on. Adrian had mentioned a couple minutes ago, age is key. Perhaps if you ask a young person 20 years or below, they'll probably swear by sources from TikTok or Wikipedia. But those of us who are older will not consider them credible and try to use sources that have stood the test of time. And I think that, yeah, recognizing the way that we evaluate sources differently is important. How might we evaluate these claims? I don't know. What do you think? Anybody have thoughts here?
I'm always in the habit of trying to find the same information from a different source that isn't a direct copy, just a direct quote. If I can find it other places, then chances are that lends credibility to it.
So it sounds to me like you're really doing that lateral reading. You're going someplace else and saying, can I find this information someplace else? Right? Can I find corroboration, we might say, of what I'm looking at here? Exactly, right? Because we could look at this, we could try to evaluate this and say, well, this does have a source. There's a source listed, so that's something, but it's a source that probably none of us have heard of. Right? Without doing lateral reading, it would be really difficult to evaluate the claim about ugly laws without doing there's not really anything backing up the other meme, that claim about the tongue being the strongest muscle. So it really would force us to do lateral reading. And what I found was interesting was that the ESL students did a really good job of evaluating these with the lateral reading. So they were navigating long pieces of text online trying to either corroborate or not do this. And they were able when they had a clear goal, right, of what the information they were looking for. And I probably don't have time. So maybe you can search for those if you're interested and see what you find. Another thing that I've done here is I've asked students to decide which of these pieces of information is trustworthy. So these two weird animals, the Pacific Northwest tree octopus and the furry lobster. And when I first started doing this, I was teaching them, I hadn't heard about the idea of lateral reading. So I was teaching them, this aspect approach, right? And I was saying, use this approach. But then once I learned about lateral reading, the idea like, oh, let's teach this as the approach. I looked back at the history and recognized that the students who were most effective at evaluating these were students who were just doing lateral reading on their own. That they just recognized, they went to this website for the Pacific Northwest tree octopus and they immediately started Googling Pacific Northwest tree octopus. And they Googled who's the guy's name on there. And they had the fastest and the most accurate responses. And then once I learned about lateral reading, I'm like, oh crap, my students were teaching me this the whole time. And I just wasn't listening. Some of the most effective students at evaluating were already using those strategies, right? And so in both of these, have some amount of issues. The furry lobster one is a little outdated. There's no clear author to it, but there are still, when students use lateral reading, it cites a bunch of scientists who did the research and they were able to verify, oh, this is real research. The Pacific Northwest tree octopus, it's my favorite animal in the world. You should Google it and learn about it. Yeah. So where are we at? In my last minute. The Pacific Northwest tree octopus has a lot of information out there about it. But please use lateral reading to evaluate it. Okay, don't go home and say Tyler Frank told me that this is a real animal. So what we did today using like the shared document and stuff is actually kind of an approach I use with my students a lot, right? Because it gets us doing the kind of reading online that I think we were thinking about at the beginning of this presentation, right? That like, what's the difference between the reading you did today and reading in a book? Somebody want to take a stab at that in the last 30 seconds that I keep you late?
I think a book is scarier because it's bigger. You don't quite know where to look. Whereas online, it's right at your fingertips. There's some headings, there's subcontext that tells more information ASAP.
Well, I would think the book is dated and the online is, I'm assuming, I guess you'd have to lateral research it, but it would be more up to date.
Did you all see the same things as each other when you were looking online? What do you think? No, right? You all saw different things because when we read online, we create our own texts, right? If I give my students a book, there's a clear limit to what they're going to read. When I put them online, we create our own texts, right? And it's that sort of really thoughtful and critical reading that it takes, but I think it takes this sort of collaborative approach of, well, let's think about how we evaluate this. Let's think about what our sources were, right? We both need to interact and have these kind of open-ended questions that get us thinking, but then we need to do the critiquing and evaluating of the information together, because it's so easy to end up in like really inaccurate things or really biased things online, right? But it's through interactive, collaborative work, I think, that we can often help our students develop those critical lenses, right? So I kept you all late. Thank you for staying. Thanks for being such good sports about me making you play around in a Google Doc. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks.